Hello and welcome to Identities with Nyari Mashayamombe, your empowerment podcast that talks about everything social, economic, and our current issues, whatever is going on in our lives. Today, I'm very privileged to be hosting amazing young leaders from the region, from the African region, and to talk about the Africa Youth Charter. And this year, we celebrate its 20th year in existence, and we just want to hear what youths think about this. Today I have the privilege to be hosting um, Teresa. Teresa is from Ghana, and she's going to talk about sexual reproductive health rights, SRHR, looking at the issues that affect young people, the progress, the challenges, and any outlooks that she thinks our governments should be doing. And then from there, we'll be also talking to Linda. Linda is from Kenya. She'll be talking about youth entrepreneurship as far as the youth charter is concerned. We also will be talking about meaningful youth participation, and to take us through that will be Mputa from Zambia. And ladies and gentlemen, join me as we go on this journey. So to talk about sexual reproductive health and rights, we have Teresa, as I mentioned earlier, who is from Ghana. Teresa, can you tell me what you think has been the progress that has been so far experienced as far as the African Youth Charter is concerned?
Thank you very much, Nyari, for having me today. It's a privilege to be on this podcast with you. So for the progress that has been so far with regards to issues of sexual and reproductive health and rights, I'd say yes, there has been some progress made so far by some African states that would have to highlight this progress, with the instance that there are so many African countries that have gone on to implement certain national policies around sexual and reproductive health and rights. We're talking of countries like Zimbabwe has a policy on the Zimbabwe National Youth, Adolescent and Youth Sexual Reproductive Health Strategy. That's from 2016 to 2020. And this policy seeks to address issues of contraception, HIV and AIDS prevention, and sexual health education. Their policy also addresses issue of teenage pregnancy, early marriages, and limited youth-friendly services. So yes, on the basis of policy, African countries have implemented certain policies to the effect of SRHR cases. And then on the issue of awareness, I would want to say since the implementation of the African Youth Charter, there has been some sort of awareness on the African continent around issues of SRHR. Young Africans are in the know of certain things around SRHR. So yes, there have been certain progress, and then I feel we can still do better.
Thank you very much. I want to move then on to Linda. And Linda, around the youth entrepreneurship, what has been the progress as far as the African Youth Charter is concerned?
Thank you so much, Nyari, and thank you, Mputa and Teresa, for just creating time for this. As far as youth entrepreneurship is concerned, and as we are all turning 20 years as the charter itself, we have to probably just go back to when the charter was being discussed, especially on the aspect of youth development and youth entrepreneurship specifically. We could hear youth entrepreneurship being coined as probably something to do with survival and something to do with, just young people, it happening to young people and not really young people leading it or spearheading it. But throughout the, evolution of that charter from 2006 to where we are right now, we've seen young people positioning themselves to spearhead, commitments in the charter, talking about young people who are running businesses from agro bamboo to small retail, businesses like selling terras or selling, having micro and small shops around just to sustain and develop that financial dependence. But as for the African Union and all these regional bodies responsible to implement this charter, we have seen them also making policy strides. We've seen them, move with intentional programmatic initiatives and also, transforming this institutional mainstreaming of these youth development or youth entrepreneurship programs. And so even the African Union, the Youth Envoy Office, they have they developed an action plan at one point that was spearheaded towards youth economic empowerment. And so is the 1 Million Next initiative, spearheaded by the African Union itself. So we can see intentionality as far as achieving the commitment in the Article 15 that recognizes that young people were going to be given that, youth entrepreneurship as an economic pathway. So yes, we have strides that are being made both at the programmatic level and also just at the policy level. We do have those practices. Back to you, Nyari.
Thank you very much, Linda, about that. And next is Mpota to tell us about the meaningful youth participation. What has been the progress as far as that is concerned, Mpota?
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So 20 years down the line, if we look at some of the progress that the intentions that the charter, when it was being created, that has been able to do, you will see in different countries where, for example, in a country like Zambia, we have the National Youth Policy. It's a policy document that then speaks to how development must be done and how young people get to be get involved in terms of development, in participation, and also youth engagement. You will see the articles in the African Charter, like Article 11, Article 12, Article 13, being the foundational principles in that particular youth policy. So the youth policy was first done in 2009 because Zambia ratified the charter then. And also when we move to other countries, for example, Rwanda, that has the National Youth Council, that has made it possible for the decentralization of the local governance. You will see that at local governance, at least 30% of the seats in that particular country are given to young people. Those are decision-making processes at community level. So those are some of the progresses that have been done. Also, you will see in countries like Kenya, where the constitution, there was need for young people. The constitution gave quotas to young people to be able to keep seats that are responsible for young people. And when you look at Article 11 of the Charter, you will see in details that some of the issues that were discussed in that particular article that needed the ratified countries. Suffice to say that out of 55 countries, 41 countries have ratified the charter, and in ratification, when you look at Article 1, binds them to implement what is in the charter, and the progress that has been made so far, policy-wise. Some of them even putting it in the constitution, but there are other countries that are lagging behind. In terms of Zambia, yes, there is a policy, but there is no legal backing of that particular development. And as we reach at 20 now, it is this progress. We need to move from policy into it being implemented into law. But suffice to say, on the backdrop of this particular charter, I think it has formed a lot of non-formal advocacy, and outside the legal framework, you will see young people in different African countries pushing for young people's participation unapologetically. And you see, for example, the likes of Zambia, where we have a movement called Youth for Parliament. In the 2021 elections, they managed to organize about 60,000 activists and young people to champion the need for young people to participate and run for office. And we saw about 12 mayors being elected in Zambia, and also young people elected as members of parliament and councillors at local level. We also see the campaign of not too young to run, making sure that the barriers that come with the cost of young people contesting in decision making is addressed. So those are some of the aside from the legal frameworks and the policies that have been put in place by member states and the states that have ratified the charter, to some of the creative means of young people that really understand the need for them to participate in that discourse and in the decision making, so that we can make a better continent. I'll end here for now. Thank you.
Wow, what a very comprehensive update from you, Puta, about that. And that really helps us, especially your mention of the framing that about 41 out of 55 countries ratified the African Charter, the ratified the Youth Charter. Very, very significant.
Welcome to Identities with Nyari Mashayamombe, your empowerment podcast where we talk about social, economic, and everyday issues that affect us. At Identities Media, we tell human stories that respect the storyteller, honor the viewer, and help build a compassionate and informed society. Our work celebrates unsung heroes and community change makers rising in the spirit of Ubuntu. As a producer and host, Nyari Mashayamombe brings her experience as a development practitioner, marketer, lawyer, storyteller, and filmmaker to ensure that every conversation is grounded, human, and deeply intentional. If you are an individual donor, a foundation, an NGO, or an institution that believes in uplifting marginalized voices, we invite you to financially support this storytelling journey. Your contribution helps us document human stories that shape policy, inspire action, and strengthen communities. We also welcome corporates, NGOs, and institutions to partner with us by sponsoring episodes or seasons, commissioning stories of change, or collaborating on documentaries, docuseries, films, and other impactful storytelling projects. You may also advertise on our platform. To donate, visit www.identitiesmedia.com. To partner or sponsor, contact us through the email and number on the screen. Identities with Nyari Mashayamombe, your empowerment podcast.
Very, very significant. And my question the question that comes to my head is that what is happening to the other countries that have not yet ratified? But I must say 41 out of 55 is quite a good number. Despite that, we still have a gap. And I want to really just come back a little bit to both Teresa and Linda. In as far as that was going to be also my quick question about, as far as we are still on the issue of progress, to say around sexual reproductive health rights. Teresa, you mentioned the Zimbabwe policy, for example. Are you able to say to what extent many countries in the region have the same? Do all the countries in the region have policies that speak into the sexual reproductive health rights of young people?
Really, we can't say all the countries that have ratified this charter have policies that speak to it. But then aside the Zimbabwean policy, there's also the Nigerian National Policy Framework on sexual reproductive health and rights. And that policy was formulated in 2010, I would want to say, 2010, and it was developed by the Federal Ministry of Health of Nigeria. It focuses on maternal health, family planning, and adolescent reproductive health. And then it also addresses systematic issues such as the low funding and then independent human resource for issues of SRHR cases. So yes, specific countries do have Zimbabwe, Ghana, top of Nigeria too. But then just as Mputo said, there are other countries that have not even ratified the charter, talk less of others not even signing it. So yeah, it's still a bit of struggle.
Thank you very much for that. And of course, I'm sure there will be many African countries with more of those. Then we'll hear more when you give us the reflection as far as the challenges are concerned, to say to what extent are these policies effective. And then I just wanted to circle back with you, Linda, around the progress issue as well, as far as you did mention the issue of how there are frameworks where young people are participating in entrepreneurship and opportunities being presented. My question was going to be, to what extent, how meaningful, for example, when a country says we have the Young People's Bank, or we are giving youth loans, how meaningful are those loans, and how accessible to the ordinary person, especially the poor young person, perhaps in the rural communities, in the peri-urban communities, and also even in our low-income communities?
Oh, wow, that's a very interesting question, Nyari. I will start from the last bit of it that you just mentioned. How accessible are these loans? It's very interesting because in the research, young people are mentioning one of the most accessible sources of capital when they want to start their businesses is their own personal finance. Now, issue of whether or not we have available, government-led capital, it's not even an issue, because if you look at all these countries, they have these, either it's probably supported by a development partner or it's just a grant by the government itself. They're available. Accessibility, it's still a bigger issue because young people are reporting in the Kenyan context, it's only 2% of the respondents that we interviewed that mentioned they get to access the government grant. So accessibility, it's still a muscle or a hurdle that we have to cross, but availability of these funds, we can see from at the program level, they exist.
What are some of the reasons why what young people are mentioning as the hurdles they have to think about? So I would think about, for the longest of time, perhaps in the Zimbabwe context, sometimes a while ago, which I think has changed a little bit. A while ago, resources would be, issues of apathy as well. So, for example, in politically polarized communities, sometimes because the states usually is associated with the ruling party, sometimes the apathy comes with the other people who are neither part of the opposition or who are not even voters, who just then think that, oh, these opportunities are just for the ruling party youths. Whereas sometimes actually, no, these opportunities will be available to young people if they go through to their either the youth council or the national youth, the ministry available. But I must hasten to say that in Zimbabwe, this is something that has developed over years. In the beginning, you would have that scenario where there was a feeling that it's only accessible to youth in the ruling party, but it has since changed. So that apathy then just hinders young people from just even approaching the Ministry of Youth or participating in their community development. They say there's opportunities here, let's go and lean in. The same for girls as well. So I would want for you also to do a laser look into the gender aspect, to say to what extent are young women as well able to access this. But maybe if you can take us through some of the hurdles that are coming. By the way, just for the viewers, this is a conversation that we are leading that is a result of the research which was done by Restless Development under the AU Youth Voices Lab Power of the Collective Project. So we're having this conversation from that backdrop of that research. But over to you, Linda.
All right, thank you so much. I think you've already mentioned some of the reasons why these funds are not accessible. In the context of research, what we gathered from young people is most of them are reporting issues of rigorous applications. You can imagine even in 2026, we have young people still reporting the issue of these funds not being publicly announced or publicly marketed to them so that they can access them. We have obviously the one that has been consistent from one generation to another, and this is bureaucratic issues of probably the systems requiring, we need you to have a business that has worked for 3 years for us to finance you. In the finance context, of course, it provides collateral, right, to guarantee you're going to repay the loan. But what about young person who's just have thought of a very innovative idea, but it has not yet taken, shape? do we just close the door on them and tell them, because you don't have traction, we are not going to fund you? And sadly so, this has been the issue that is happening in the green or emerging sectors like the green economy, and where young people with all these ideas are encountering climate cartels or climate finance cartels who say, you know what, you don't have a working model that we can provide you funds for, maybe work on it for a few more years and then come back for financing. But this idea is not going to stay with that young person for another 3 years. It's probably going to be taken by a corporation that already has a collateral, and then they lose the idea in the process. So we are killing innovations just because we are looking for working models. And innovation does not present itself as an evidence. Sometimes it presents itself just as a dream yet. And these are things young people are telling us. And in the Kenyan context, as far as political apathy goes, our Auditor General is exactly reporting the issues the young people are saying. That half of these funds are being misappropriated because of the political misinformation that is associated with it. Where politicians treat these available grants as, as free money. And so they go out there and they confuse the young people who have been given access to these funds. Then they don't get to pay because they're like, this is our money. And when they don't get to pay, they hinder access for the larger group of young people because these funds are presented in quotas. They don't just give, everyone. Kenya has a huge number of young people, but they have quotas, which is another limit. So when you tell a certain group of young people don't repay, then we're walking in a very difficult circus where we're blocking each other as we try to help each other again. So I think those are things that were mentioned in our research, Nyari.
Thank you very much, Linda, for being very comprehensive in that response as far as young people are concerned. Very interesting indeed. I just want to take us to our next round, where I'm going to start with Mputa to tell us what are some of the challenges that we've been recording around the issue of as far as youth, meaningful youth participation as far as the Africa Charter is concerned as we turn 20.
Thank you very much. So 20 years after the charter came into existence, after doing a research, like you rightly mentioned, from 14 countries within the continent, you will see that some of the challenges when the charter was being developed are the challenges that still exist today. And one of them is you find that tokenism participation is a form of tokenism. You will see in the report that people from, for example, Cameroon and Zambia highlighted that they were only consulted after the decision has been made on what should be done about that particular policy. And you will see that beyond the tokenism report highlights the need for there's always participation theater, where participation is just some form of making sure that there were young people in the room, and those that are invited mostly are those from elite, elitist or politically connected, are the ones that then get to participate in these national issues. And if you're not politically connected, you are not from a certain community. And mostly you will see in the report from over 1,400 responses that a lot of them highlighted that largely it is just the people in the urban areas that participate in some of this decision, and the neglect of high lack of a ladder of participation brings a big concern, because adults continue in the report. What was termed by most of the respondents is a manipulation of there is already a preconceived mind of the adults that are framing that particular law, that are framing that particular policy that speaks to addressing the issues of young people, and they just come as part of the just participate for the sake of participation. Away from that, also there is an economic challenge that comes with the implementation of this. You will see that most of the African countries, about 50% of their revenue that they collect their servicing debt. And because they are servicing debt, it is impossible for young people to for young people to have jobs, meaningful jobs that then can make them have the financial stability. Aside from that, a lot of young people in different countries, the participation fee in some of these, more especially political position, if you have to run for councillor, you have to run for MP, you have to run for governor or president, you need to have a certain amount of money for you just to participate. You will see other reports like the Afrobarometer. You will see, for example, in the case of Zambia, under the Transparency International research, is that for a candidate to run in an urban setup, for example, in Lusaka, they need something like a 5 million kwacha, and that 5 million kwacha, it is something like 500,000 USD for them to run a successful campaign. And which young person who is just from graduating from university, but they have the skills and meaningful knowledge to make an impact that is needed in our society through being part of the decision makers, that is going to have that kind of money for them to participate. So those are some of the challenges that I feel, if there is a review of the youth charter, we need to address the need for what happens as in the continent for young people when they want to participate, the fees that exist. We must address it as a continent, because young people are the largest majority. Each country that you look at, you find that young people are the larger majority of that particular population, and it is a majority that must participate in shaping their future. And also, you will see that the debt challenges that we have as a country, you find that they are restructuring deals, and those deals that are restructuring, they are transferring the burden of that debt to the future generations, and that in itself incapacitates and puts at a risk young people in future, because they will inherit the country with a lot of debt. And when I come back in my recommendations, I will recommend some of the aspects that we can do to address some of these very chronicle challenges and barriers that are hindering the participation of young people, meaningful participation of young people around the continent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm very impressed by your take, Puta. The very comprehensive take on the challenges that are facing the young people as far as meaningful participation is concerned. You did raise very important issues of tokenism, decision theater. I hope I got you right when you said decision. Did you say decision theater? That's very, very... Participation theater. Or participation theater. I found that very interesting, because indeed, just so that the issue of just wanting to tick boxes. And then one of the things that I kept thinking about as we were talking, Potter, was the issue of vote buying. As we're talking about how, basically we are far a little bit from meaningful youth participation. And as you're talking about, I think just, combining with the points Linda earlier on made around the issue of the disempowerment economically of the youths. And when someone, I think we see this in Zimbabwe, in many African nations really, where youth can be just given $2, $5 worth of groceries, and they are, invited to vote for someone. And so, I mean, when we're talking about youth participation, it's a all round, whether we're talking about participation in the home, participation in the community, participation through voting, participation, all manner of participation. So I just really was thinking about youth voting as well, which cheapens the agency of the youth, because then if I'm going to reduce my vote to a small grocery package of $2, in Zimbabwe they call it katsaona. These politicians, sometimes they come up with little packages that they give people, which are meaningless. I mean, sometimes it's a day's grocery, and then and because of poverty, sometimes people don't even question these things. They just also just go and put their vote to that person who gave them money. As you rightfully then said, that at the end of the day, you're looking for about 500,000 campaign, $500,000 campaign for someone to be successful. That's where, it keeps going on for the same people, the same men. That leads me to my next question for you, Mputa, to say, what are the observations of that report around young women's political or leadership participation, as well as gender-based violence, as far as also, so when we're talking about participation, it's just not voting, it's also running for office, right? Wanting to be in that seat as well. And you've spoken about 500,000. What is the situation of young African women as far as participation is concerned?
Largely, what was highlighted and working with different social movements in my experience within Zambia, for example, Youth for Parliament and Girls Gone Political, you get to realize the biggest challenge is the financial aspect, like I've mentioned. Not a lot of young people practical because of the patriarchal nature of our systems in the patriarchal nature of the systems around the continent and how the society was built. You will see largely that women are disadvantaged in terms of having finances. The second one is that elections are highly violent in the African setup. For example, in Zambia, political violence is rampant during campaigns, and that in itself makes it very difficult for women to participate in that election, most especially if it involves bloodshed. Those are some of the challenges. Aside from that, political repression, there are laws that are being put across, cyber laws around the continent. You see, for example, the case of Uganda, Tanzania, that there is a lot of surveillance, and that is was one of the highest numbers of respondents who responded that particular repression, political repression that comes with high surveillance and all that, has disadvantaged young people from participation, and also and young women from participation. And also you will see young women who are living with disabilities. You find that a government parliament, you will say that, okay, for example, like in Zambia, a new constitutional amendment says there will be people with disabilities that will go to parliament after the general election this year. But when you look at the structure of the parliament, you will see that a person on a wheelchair, a person on crutches that can't walk, will struggle climb those stairs. And in one of the report, I've just forgotten which country highlighted, I think it was Nigeria, where one young person highlighted that even parliament itself, the staircases that are there for us to get into the actual parliament as a parliamentarian and people with a disability, it's very difficult. So hence those are some of systematic neglect, and political repression that are making it difficult in the case of Uganda and Tunisia. Thank you.
Please come again on the case of Uganda and Tunisia.
The case of Uganda and Tunisia, the most respondents responded that there is high political repression and also surveillance is very high in terms of young people participation. That limits young people participation because it creates the state of fear in young people to speak on issues that affect them.
Thank you very much. Pretty much very interesting responses there, pretty much across the region. Think about Malawi, South Africa, Tanzania. We are hearing from Rwanda, from Ghana, as well as Uganda. you did mention that the report looks at 14 countries, and as you're saying, they're pretty much underlying similar issues that we're hoping that through the charter, through the holding our ministers, governments accountable, through meaningful youth participation, some of these things will change. And I was just, as you're talking, I was just thinking about, campaigns like Elect Her. I know here in Zimbabwe, South Africa, as well as Kenya, there are many campaigns that are championing the election of women, as well as youth. I think you did mention that Too Young to Run is one of the Africa's very popular campaign for young people, and I think that's something profound. And as we were talking also about the issues of participation, I was thinking about in Zimbabwe right now we have the Constitutional Amendment Bill number 3 of 2026 that is really, that is proposing some very concerning constitutional changes, and a lot of young people are calling for a referendum because some of the changes are very significant in that bill. So it really remains to say we are in a 3-month period where the citizens have an opportunity to engage with that bill. And from where we've been hearing, a lot of young people are saying for the changes that are coming in the constitution, we want a referendum. So it remains to be seen that whether the Zimbabwe government is going to also respect some of the calls by young people. And of course, it's a mixed bag. Many people coming up with their own interesting views. Ladies and gentlemen, I really want to thank you for the amazing conversation we've had, a very passionate, well-prepared conversation by young people, by young leaders, researchers, leaders from Africa. And I had the privilege to speak to Teresa from Ghana, Linda from Kenya, Mputa from Zambia. They both spoke passionately about their thematic areas that they do focus on. That was a result of the report that was made, that is titled AU Youth Voices, Lab Power of the Collective Project, that was implemented by Restless Development and the partners that you see below. We are so grateful that you watched this. Until next time, have a good one.
Welcome to Identities with Nyari Mashayamombe, your empowerment podcast where we talk about social, economic, and everyday issues that affect us. At Identities Media, we tell human stories that respect the storyteller, honor the viewer, and help build a compassionate and informed society. Our work celebrates unsung heroes and community change makers rising in the spirit of Ubuntu. As a producer and host, Nyari Mashayamombe brings her experience as a development practitioner, marketer, lawyer, storyteller, and filmmaker to ensure that every conversation is grounded, human, and deeply intentional. If you are an individual donor, a foundation, an NGO, or an institution that believes in uplifting marginalized voices, we invite you to financially support this storytelling journey. Your contribution helps us document human stories that shape policy, inspire action, and strengthen communities. We also welcome corporates, NGOs, and institutions to partner with us by sponsoring episodes or seasons, commissioning stories of change, or collaborating on documentaries, docuseries, films, and other impactful storytelling projects. You may also advertise on our platform. To donate, visit www.identitiesmedia.com. To partner or sponsor, contact us through the email and number on the screen. Identities with Nyari Mashayamombe, your empowerment podcast.